began, and it's running a little bit long, so thank you for your patience.
Okay, can I start? All right, good morning, everybody. Let's call the meeting to order for the, let me see here, the Independent Transportation Surtax Oversight Board. Today is June 11th, 2021. Can we get a roll call, Ms. Thompson?
Sure, Chair. Alan Hooper.
Here.
Doug Coolman.
Here.
Phil Allen.
Here.
Ronald Frazier.
Here.
Dr. Consuelo Kelly. Allison Love.
Here.
Deborah Madden.
Here.
Anthea Pennant.
Here.
And Shay Smith.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Is there any public participation?
No, Mr. Chair, no one has signed up from the public to speak.
Okay, great. Okay, so the regular agenda, we have action items. The first one is a motion to approve the minutes for April 29th.
Yeah,
I so move.
it's not forwarded. You just,
Operator, could I please ask that the participants on the line mute themselves?
we have action items. The first one.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I think we have a motion from Mr. Coolman to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Is there any discussion on the minutes from April 29th? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay. The motions, the minutes are approved. Number two, fiscal year 2021 Municipal Capital Project, application results and recommendations, presentation. I believe that's, I'm going to try to pronounce this, Bryan Caletka.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and board members. I first want to thank Mrs. Cassini for inviting me here to give this presentation to you. As it says, I'm Bryan Caletka, the Director of Transportation Policy for the Broward Metropolitan Planning Organization. So we are tasked with up to doing 4 different tasks for the MAP administration. The first is to develop procedures and process. This must also be approved by the county administrator. Task 2 is to rank the new capital projects that didn't either make the first 110 or they were brand new and they were not conceived of during the initial stages of the Surtax implementation. The third, which I'm talking to you about today, is to recommend municipal capital projects within the MAG, which is our budget. And then there's an optional fourth, which is the county administrator can request us to recommend above the MAG and to review and recommend projects within the budget that she provides to us. So cycle 1 is what we're focusing on. All of the cities insisted that we go in order of the initial ranked cycle 1 projects, those that are contained in the first 1 through 110. This year's budget was $39.8 million. We subtracted the $19 million for the community shuttle. We subtracted $11 million for the Miramar Parkway extension to give an installment towards that very expensive large project. And then our remaining budget was approximately $10 million. So this is what $10 million can get you. I digress. All we do, it's very mechanical. You just take the next unfunded project from the 5-year plan, we fund it until we run out of money, which is the remaining, $21 million after the community shuttle is taken out. So here we're presenting to you projects 73, 74, 75, and 76 today. You have already approved these projects. You've seen these. They just didn't make it into the 5-year plan, and now we're recommending that they do. The project that this board has not seen is project that was ranked 18 from the town of Pembroke Park. There were questions about eligibility. We believe that these questions have at least initially been completed along with some of the documentation that they provided us and to the county. And we further believe that it will be ready for construction in 2026. So this is the only project that you haven't seen. When you combine all of the allocations for each of the projects that are also in a construction cost index provided by the Florida Department of Transportation, there is a remainder of about $1.2 million that the county is at liberty to do many things with, including if that index is under what it needs to be, it can accommodate the construction cost. They can use it for rehab and maintenance, or they can roll it over to 2027 MAG for further projects. So here's my contact information. I'm available to answer any questions, and I know there's going to be at least one.
Yes, Mr. Allen.
Bryan, in your presentation, you speak in terms of adding these projects to the 5th year of the program.
Yes, sir.
And the question I have after reviewing interim financial statements for the first 6 months of this year, it reflects that there's $175 million worth of municipal projects. The total amount of municipal projects approved by this board and budgeted have not incurred any expenditures. And I'm just questioning why we're continuing to add municipal projects when, in fact, the existing projects do not appear to be moving.
So the first part of that question is that there are projects that have actually been completed, like they've completed the design allocation that they received from 2020, but they haven't filled out the forms to get the reimbursement. That's only happened for a couple of the projects. But this is also just for the rolling 5th year of 2026, so it gives them basically 5 years to get ready for construction at that time. So it's just the 5th year budget.
But there are other projects that may have from cities that have not been ranked yet, and projects that are construction ready. When we're holding money in reserve, in effect, for these other cities who are not, even with what they told us were construction ready projects that have not in fact moved, it seems like it's unfair to those other cities who have other projects that are legitimately quote unquote construction ready, that they are waiting in line to even be authorized to proceed into planning or whatever the phase is that they're moving forward on.
Yes, sir. I actually share that concern, but it was the cities that insisted that we go in order for cycle 1 first. And that's what everybody as a collective agreed to.
When you finish.
Oh, sorry.
When you finish.
I'm done.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, board members. Mr. Allen, with respect to your question, yes, there was between FY19 and FY20, $125 million in funds allocated for municipal projects, and an additional $50 million, I believe, in for the current fiscal year, 2021. So that's the $175 million that you're referring to. There were 110 ranked municipal capital projects, 97 of which this oversight board recommended as eligible and for which funding was received. There were another 40 municipal rehab and maintenance projects for which funding was allocated. Of those 137 projects, we've only received documentation for a portion of those. So there are 80 projects in total, 56 municipal capital and 24 municipal rehab and maintenance projects for which we have not received any documentation to prepare agreements. We have finalized some funding agreements for municipal projects for which funding was allocated, and we've received documentation for some. And for the ones for which we've received complete checklists and documentation, we are working with the municipal attorneys to finalize those agreements. But when we understand your concern about funding additional projects, there are no new municipal capital projects being recommended for funding yet. So while the interlocal agreement among the county, the municipalities, and the MPO requires the MPO to accept applications for new projects each year and rank them, so the MPO did that. But none of those ranked projects for this year are being recommended because there's no funds available within the MAG. So what we have to do, based upon the current language of our interlocal agreement, is get through the 97, well, I guess 110, because like for number 18, the municipality withdrew the project from consideration last year, but it was within the 110 that the MPO recommended. They deferred the project until this year. And so the county is required to fund the remaining phases of the 110 projects, those which were that are eligible within the MAG, until all of those projects are funded, until they're finalized, either withdrawn, and there are some, you are correct, that, are not ready for construction. There are other projects that could possibly be ready for construction, but the agreement requires us to follow the process that Mr. Caletka outlined today. And if the MPO, I guess if the county makes additional funds available above the MAG for municipal projects, there will be additional funding that's allocated while the projects that were already approved are not really moving.
Well, what is the mechanism for, if I could proceed, Mr. Chairman, what is the mechanism? Are you saying that all 110 projects that have been approved must be complete before any new projects are added?
The interlocal agreement says that we have to fund the remaining phases of those projects within the minimum annual guarantee, which is the county's committed 10%, before we fund anything else. So if the county makes funds available.
I'm sorry, but if one city with one project out there doesn't proceed with their project, they're holding up the funding for other new projects that may come along from the other cities.
That's correct.
Is there any mechanism to carve that out and say, hey, you told us you were proceeding with this project and nothing has happened after 3 years?
So
What is our option to move forward? And is this a role that this body can influence?
So that's contractual. And for projects for which construction phase funding was allocated, the municipalities have 3 years from the time of the funding allocation to begin the construction of that project. So that to have their agreement in place for the funding and to begin construction. If they do not begin construction within that 3-year time frame, then the county has the ability under the contract to cancel the project. So, but the ones that are for which planning or design funds have been allocated that are not moving, we do not have a mechanism in place for that. So, and if the municipality does not want to proceed with the project, then the municipality has to submit written notification to the MPO and to the county that they want to withdraw the project. It is our understanding that there are some such projects, but we have not received written notification of the municipality's desire to withdraw it, so the project still sits on the books.
Again, is there any role for this body to monitor or to grade performance or to make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners relative to these contractual relationships that are not proceeding?
So part of the evaluation process of the projects will include whether the project is delivered and whether it's delivered timely, whether there was delay. And so those are all factors that are considered and will be included in recommendations regarding what should proceed, what should occur with that project and the municipality's interest in future funding.
Mr. Chairman, I raised this issue. I think this is something I'm very concerned with, and I have been since the very beginning of the establishment of this body. This community has, over the last many years, had a great deal of attention focused on a $800 million school bond levy, which was promised. Projects that were promised as part of that program that have in fact not proceeded and now are many $1 million over budget. One of the reasons being that either they didn't do the estimates right or because of the delay in moving forward, those projects have gone beyond the budgets. And I have raised this issue relative to the performance of the MAP program, that we don't want to get into that same situation that we've seen across the street. I bring this to the board's attention that we need to start paying attention to the expenditure of these funds to ensure that they in fact are, not only are they meeting the requirements of the state statutes, but they are proceeding reasonably in concluding the projects that have been promised to the voters of Broward County. And this board needs to be focusing on that on a periodic basis to see how are these projects proceeding? Is there a problem? What's the holdup? Can county staff assist the cities in getting these projects moving? What roles do we have to influence going forward? And I would,
Let's have a discussion about that.
Pardon?
I think we should be discussing that right now.
Well, I
You
don't
said
know
wrong.
if we have the time to discuss that right
Well,
now.
you
I
started
think
it.
there are too many questions as to which projects, are proceeding, which ones aren't proceeding, which ones have asked to defer.
Okay.
And this needs to be an agenda item perhaps for our next board meeting, that we really bear down on this particular aspect.
Okay, Mr. Kuhlman.
Yeah, and following on what Phil's suggested here, I have a question and a comment. The first question is, how many projects are out there that aren't funded yet, but are ready to go? Is it 1, is it 100, is it 50, and how much money is involved? That's first question. The comment is, I do think we have a role. We're writing our own rules to a certain extent. This is new, the whole thing is new. And to find out that, I don't know, 60, 70, 80% of these projects haven't even moved forward that are approved for money, what are we doing or staff doing to these cities to say, your agreement says you have 3 years, but we need to see some movement here. This is not fair to anybody, not the taxpayers that voted for it, the people that are being shut out. So I think we need to do something to move the cities that are approved, that are holding up others. And then to follow that, if we find out that the list is, that there are cities that are shovel-ready that could start, then let's find the money. Maybe we don't have to upset that apple cart, but is there money available to move some of this stuff a little different? We're only in year 2 of this, or 3, and we're learning, so let's do something.
Okay, so his first question, can you answer that? About how many projects are out there, how many have been stalled, and what amount is that?
So the exact dollar amount I don't have in front of me, but there are at least 2 projects where the community is choosing not to move forward at this time. One of them is a community where they had an election back in November, and they had a change of a couple of their governing body members, and they're in a holding pattern because they're not sure if they want to move forward with it or not. I personally have pursued trying to get a letter of saying, hey, we're not moving forward with this. And when they're basically under the misunderstanding, they think that if they don't use it for the project that they were given the money for, that they can use it for something else, and that's not the way it works. It's the county's money. So it goes back to the county. It doesn't go with the municipality. And when they learned that, they got scared that they would go to their governing body and said, I just gave away $10 million and looked like the bad person. So they immediately stopped taking phone calls when they realized that it wasn't their money. And I don't know why they believed it was theirs to begin with, but they're looking at making an official decision within the next year. So at least for a couple of the projects, it has to do with the governing body has changed.
Did you want to
Mr.
say
Chairman.
something, Mr.
Yeah, if I
Smith?
could. So a couple of things. One, I think this idea that there's no clawback on the design phase sounds like a mistake to me, that they can be approved for design, and it sounds to me, unless I'm misinterpreting, that there is no 3-year termination to start that design phase, so they can just stall indefinitely. So that to me sounds like a problem, if I'm understanding that. Secondly, I think a very simple way to look at this is from a taxpayer's and a citizen's perspective, where if the funds accumulate into the funds that we're managing and into this program to a very large extent, and things just aren't moving, that's just the baseline we have to get back to. We are here to represent the citizens, and if I'm a citizen, which I am, it would be upsetting to approve something. I mean, the money's still coming in. So to the extent, from a very simple perspective, to the extent that it's not moving and these funds are just growing, we really do have to figure out a mechanism, because that will just look like a bloated, slow governmental project, and people will rightly criticize it. So I do think we have a role. I mean, we're here to represent the voters, and so I think we have a role.
Well, just let me say something. First of all, we're talking about the MPO's program, the 10%. Okay, so the county is moving forward on all the projects that we've approved on those. Am I correct, Ms. Cassini?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the county, it continues to bring you projects that are actually accelerated, that are moving ahead of schedule, and that are on time and on budget.
So the issue is we have 30, I don't remember if it's 32 or 33, but we got a bunch of cities out there, okay? I'm in the construction business, okay? When someone says construction ready, and I have to sign 110 contracts, right? We got to go through 110 agreements. We approved these how long ago?
This time last year.
August.
It was
It was August.
Okay, so I'm just going to tell you, like,
for the FY20.
Sorry,
And
I
then
was talking,
in
yeah. I'm so-
August for the FY21.
I've negotiated 1 trillion general contracts and leases, and they take time, okay? And then when you put them on the county attorney's lap and you put them into the, and then you have to deal with 33 city attorneys, okay? All right, so now a lot of this stuff isn't happening because it's just part of the tentacles of what it takes to get a job started. Second, you're going to have those, they're like kids, 33 kids. You're going to have some of them that don't know how to operate. They're going to think, wow, I'm going to lose the money now. What can I do? And honestly, I think that if there is a logjam in the MPO system, the one that they're managing, and there are a few cities that are jamming everything up, I got a feeling there's going to be an amendment coming, right? There should be, if they're smart. And they should come up with an amendment that puts a timeline on something and divides it into phases and timelines on those phases, because sometimes architectural or design engineer work takes a certain amount of time, teeing up the construction takes a certain amount of time, actually executing the construction would take longer. So you start putting timelines on those things, and if you don't hit that timeline, you can terminate that agreement and move on to the next project. So I think there is a way to do it, but it's going to fall on the MPO, who is managing these 33 cities and all of these projects, to realize and to probably come and speak to the county and say, hey, let's do an amendment to the interlocal agreement so that if we have a logjam, we can push one aside and bring the others in. I think this is the first, this really truly is the first real round, and it's a 5-year deal, okay? So I'm so happy that Mr. Allen has his eyes on the road and he brought this up. I think it's something we could discuss further in our workshop, but I also think that it's part of a start, a beginning, a growing pain, and it's very complex to get 110 projects at well over, how much, 175 million? $175 million. It's a very difficult thing. And we can't fault ourselves or the county for it happening, or this program for it happening, because chances were it was going to happen.
Right.
Okay.
So if I may,
Brian,
Chair.
my question, Brian, was, maybe you can bring this to the workshop. How many city projects out there are shovel-ready that aren't in this 110 that could start, and how much money is it? And can we find that money without
Can't do that.
doing this other thing too? I think the other thing needs to be fixed, Alan, I agree with you.
This is
But-
the MPO's part of the money. This is the 10%. We can't just go and say, okay, let's find the money for the
No.
other cities that have not, that are being held up.
I'm saying there may be, I think we need to fix what Mr. Allen and you were talking about. I agree 100%. Maybe it's amendment, whatever it is. But I'm just curious, how many cities are we delaying that are shovel-ready with projects? Do we know that? And if it's not a lot of money, is there a way to fund that so we're not holding them up while we fix this other problem? That's all.
I
Mr.
just
Chair.
want to make it clear. Don't say we. It's not we, okay? Right?
Right. So if I may, Chair, so out of the 137 projects for which funding was allocated, there are 80 projects for which we have not received any documentation for purposes of preparing the agreement to provide the funds. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
So, I mean, in order to prepare the agreements, we need the checklist. We have established a process within the county. There are checklists for each type of project. There's documentation that must accompany that checklist in order for us to to prepare the agreements. There are a lot of projects that were included on the list of recommendations and for which funding was allocated, where it was represented that the project was ready for construction. And ready for construction means, as you know, complete construction documents,
That's
ready
right.
for a construction bid. Well, they're not.
Right. Okay.
So, I mean, those are the things that need to be addressed. The bottleneck doesn't start with the county. The bottleneck is before, it hasn't gotten, the documents
Right.
haven't gotten to us.
That's right.
And so, and the MPO doesn't control what happens inside the municipalities in terms of their preparing these documents to submit to the county. I think Mr. Caletka properly explained the MPO's role, which is to review the submittals from the applications from the municipalities and make recommendations to the county, but they're not involved in the preparation of the documents for the agreements with us. So
That may be an area of attack we might want to consider, is forming some kind of a task group that would just focus on moving paper, moving these projects forward. That's not under, as I understand it, MPO's part of the contract expires when or is completed when they had made the recommendations to us for projects to fund. It doesn't go on to a continuing basis of monitoring to ensure that the cities are complying with the contract. And I don't know whether that task force or that task group, or the TAC team or whatever you want to call it, would be county staff or MPO staff or hiring some kind of a consultant, if you will, to just help the cities move these projects forward, whether that be in assisting them in their advertising projects or selecting project completion things, or just moving paper, how to get, in contact with the county attorney's office, or how to get these things on, and then attack each one of these projects and focus on those until they get moving. And that's a role we might want to consider down the road, or recommend down the road.
And the ideal scenario would be, which it is not provided for in our agreement, but which we attempted to get. I know it was my recommendation that these projects and the status of the projects be evaluated annually, and prospectively, once we get beyond the projects that were included in the Cycle 1 recommendations, that is the process. So the projects that were submitted, applications for projects that were submitted in the process this year were ranked, but there's no funding available within the MAG. Those will not hold that ranking. So the MPO next year will have another application process, and they will review the submittals, and through that process, the readiness and leverage, funding leverage, and all kinds of other factors that will determine the true readiness of the project will be evaluated in its recommendations for funding.
That's right.
But the municipalities insisted upon those originally ranked projects maintaining their status, which is not feasible, and it's resulted in the scenario that we find ourselves in now. And it would require an amendment, so the municipalities whose projects could be moving, that are not happy with the current status, would need to push another amendment to the agreement that would require annual analysis and evaluation of each of the projects for recommendation for subsequent funding. And if it's not moving, then we should be able to fund other projects that are ready.
That's right.
But that is not, contractually, we don't have that option with regard to the Cycle 1 ranked municipal capital projects.
Has this issue come before the MPO? Have they even addressed this concern at this point in time? Can you tell us?
Well, no, because we rank and recommend as required by the Second Amendment. We adopted it, of course, we're a party to the Second Amendment.
So, but the MPO as a policy-making body has not, as you are aware, raised this as a concern or an issue?
No.
Mr.
Ms.
Chair?
Finney, and then Ms. Pennant.
Thank you.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Anthony.
I just wanted to address specifically Vice Chair Kuhlman's question about construction readiness and just kind of provide, in case there are municipalities that are listening, the encouragement that there are construction-ready projects that are not capital projects, that are not within the purview of what the MPO is doing. So as Angela pointed out, there were 97 projects of various phases that were brought forth through the MPO's process. Those were capital projects, and they were in planning, design, and construction phases. Very few of those were construction phase. In fact, 33 were construction phase. The whole rest of the list were all planning and design phase. There are 40 construction phase rehabilitation and maintenance projects. Those are managed by the county, and it's the county's process. And many of those projects are, in fact, construction ready. And we would encourage those municipalities that have rehabilitation and maintenance projects. One of the criteria in order for a municipality to be recommended for funding was the ability to construct that project within 12 months of execution of the agreement. And we did that purposefully because we know that these construction projects are an economic stimulus during a pandemic. So again, we would encourage those municipalities that have rehabilitation and maintenance projects that were approved by this body and appropriated funds in 2020 to submit the documents that are necessary, the construction checklist documents, because that will help to address some of the concerns of this body. And that's why we have both processes. And I wanted to go back to the question that several of you asked, which is, what are we doing to try to get the cities the technical assistance and support that they need? That's what we're here for. That's what the staff in MAP admin do. The 7 people that work in MAP administration are constantly doing workshops, providing technical assistance, reaching out to each municipality on a regular basis, checking in. Have you submitted the documents? Do you need any assistance? We have, teleconferences where the lawyers are involved. It's an ongoing discussion and dialogue trying to make sure that the municipalities have the resources and understand what is necessary so we can get these projects executed.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad we're discussing this issue. I'm curious to know, what are some of the common problems that these cities are reporting? You say they're in touch with you. I was going to ask that question, but then...
And I'm sure Angela is going to have a different perspective because she's communicating directly with the legal counsel. We're talking more with the technical staff, the project managers, the Surtax points of contact. So from my perspective, what I'm hearing is there's a great deal of staff turnover. There are a lot of people that have been, as you know, working from home for an extended period of time. There's kind of a disconnect in communication. And there is also a misunderstanding in some instances of what the process is. So we've been doing workshops, we've been providing, videos, we have all kinds of recordings and municipal partner resources on our website to try to help, FAQs, everything, that we've been talking about here, trying to make sure that people understand what it is that needs to be done. But there's a great deal there's a disconnect procedurally. So I've had multiple municipalities call and say, where's my funding agreement? And we say, well, have you submitted the documents? Well, what documents? So it's an educational process because you are dealing with 29 different municipalities, all of varying sizes. Some of these municipalities are very small. They might only have 5 or 6 staff people that are doing multiple things. So some of this is just an education, as the chair pointed out. This is the first time that we're doing it, and people are trying to understand exactly what it is that is expected of them.
And then my last question is, how does this affect cost? Because I'm thinking the longer this gets dragged out, it's going to impact the cost of the projects. And who's going to bear the burden of that cost? Is it going to be the county, or more being expensed from the penny tax budget?
Well, I'm happy to say that through this new process in the Second Amendment, not only do we use the construction cost index to account for the change in inflation for the cost of the project, but we also this year required each of the municipalities to get an independent verification of their cost estimates. So it's not just, I think it's going to cost $10 million for this project. It's, here's the breakdown of the cost, and have an independent agency verify that that is true and correct. So it adds an extra layer of comfort that the cost is reasonable and not underestimated and going to cost the county more later.
Right, you know, I've always believed that, you know, for some of these design and planning projects, that the municipalities should have skin in the game. I really believe that, and I think for them to drag it out more and potentially increase costs that might end up being blown back to the county or any other funding source, penny tax, is unfair. And I would like to know how we're gonna, moving forward, try to remedy that.
If I may, the contract requires that any cost for the municipal projects in excess of the funds allocated by the county are borne by the municipality. So if they exceed the cost estimate, they exceed what's been allocated so far, and so there's the FDOT factor, multiplication factor for construction that is calculated as part of the 5-year plan, but the planning and design projects for which funding has been allocated thus far, if those exceed the funds that have been, and even construction, if construction costs exceed the amount that's allocated by the county, then the municipality bears that cost. The agreement allows the municipality to request additional funds, surtax funds, if there are unforeseen conditions that are discovered during construction, but that's a request. It's not required that we allocate funding to cover those costs.
Yes, I have two questions for Gretchen, which may answer Ms. Pennett's comment. One, do you need more staff to specifically set up a task force to work more closely with the cities? And two, do you need a motion from this board to develop an amendment to the existing condition to clear up this logjam?
Vice Chair, to the first question, I don't believe so. We do have a request in our fiscal year 2022 that you'll be seeing in August, hopefully. I don't know if it will be recommended, but we did ask for an additional financial position to assist with getting the type of financial documentation that's required. But no, I think we are adequately staffed and resourced to be able to provide the technical assistance. There's also a project management office that's working on this. I think you heard from them last year. We have an engineer, senior engineer that's providing technical assistance specifically to the technical aspects of these projects. And I'm going to prepare an analysis based on the discussion here today of exactly where we are with all of the projects that will be brought forth to you during your workshop on the 19th of August. And at that point, I think we'll have a better understanding of exactly where we are and what strategies we might need to employ to be able to move forward.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I think it comes down to an issue of ownership. The cities don't claim any ownership of this project or this program. And until the citizens recognize that their cities have been approved for funding projects that in many cases are critical projects within their neighborhoods, within their cities, that are not in fact proceeding, somebody in the city is going to get an ownership kernel to say, hey, we need to do something about this. It's a matter of ownership. The county can't force them to spend the money. They can apply for it and we can approve those projects, but it really comes down to the cities to execute once they have received the approvals to move forward. And the elected officials within those cities need to take some ownership for their citizens, for their taxpayers, to make sure these projects get moving.
All right, can I make a recommendation? Honestly, I think that I'd like to wait for Gretchen to get all the information together, and maybe at our next meeting or even our workshop, we can discuss it and what our plan of action will be at that point. I think honestly, the MPO is here. They speak to the 33 cities, and I think it's an issue that they need to be made aware of. Honestly, and if you look at some of the way the projects were presented and how others were, some of them were very well organized. It looked like they were ready to go. It's going to be those projects and those cities that are organized that are going to demand that the other cities get it together, or there's going to be a logjam. Okay, so I think really the MPO could go back right now and take the first stab at letting the cities know what's starting to happen, and then let's formulate a plan, and then we'll either send a message to the county as a recommendation, and or to the MPO. We can talk about what the next cycle of projects, how those are being dealt with. I love the idea of valuing shovel readiness at a much higher level, and maybe we can make that recommendation to the MPO. And I appreciate Mr. Allen's catching this, because it's really an important piece of the program.
I have a question. I understand the cities have, in the agreement, have 3 years to begin construction, is that correct?
Yes, for projects for which construction phase funding has been allocated, they have 3 years to begin to execute their agreement for the funds and to begin construction. And if they do not within that 3 years, then the county can cancel the project.
So have any of these cities exceeded that 3-year period that's at this point?
No, so there are projects for which the funding was allocated in June of last year, and if the construction for which there's no agreement, so they've lost a year.
But they're still right now in compliance with the procedural aspect of they have 3 years.
Correct,
So
because
that
it's only been 1 year.
counterintuitive.
Last year was the first time that funding was allocated, so they have 2 more years to actually execute the agreement for the construction funding and begin construction.
So for the purposes from a procedural standpoint, the cities are in compliance. They haven't exceeded anything yet.
Correct. Based upon the terms of the agreement, yes, that was worked into the terms of the agreement. So they are in compliance. And I think the issue is that's causing a backlog. Yeah.
But right now, the issue is not an issue because they do have 3 years.
That's true.
Right, but maybe the rules or the basis for compliance was incorrect in the first place, right?
Sure.
So that's something that we need to look at, either for future contracts so we can adjust moving forward, or right now, make addendums to what is established.
Well,
Because
I have to tell you that takes agreement among the parties. So it is in an agreement, a written contract among the county, the MPO, and 29 of the 31 municipalities. And the reason it is like that is because it was what the municipalities requested. So, and it was an accommodation because there was a lot of, we want to keep our place in line. And so, it will take a majority of the participating municipalities to be upset about those who are holding their place in line and therefore holding up money.
That's right.
Right. Well, this is definitely an issue that needs to be revisited. I think that even the cities need to be a part of that discussion, so they now understand, because at the time that the rule was made, and they all agreed to it, they were operating with limited perspectives. And I think now that we're in the reality, then I think they all need to understand what the impact could be for all of them. Because today it might be your project, but next time it could be, today it might be somebody else's project, but tomorrow it's your project. So we still, I don't think that we can leave this alone. I think all parties need to be aware of the impact that's taking place. And maybe there needs to be some kind of itemization of what the impacts are, so we can make a strong case for why change is necessary.
Okay. I think we'll be talking about this more at the next meeting. Thank you, Phil, for bringing this up.
I do have a quick question.
Oh, go ahead, Dr. Kelly.
Did I hear you say that there are projects that have been completed?
The agreement for the surtax funding, the interlocal agreement which provides the surtax funding to the municipality for the project has been completed. And there are municipalities who are in the process of the construction bid process for those projects. Davie, I know, is one of them. I think that has 2 or 3 construction projects. We've completed the agreement providing the surtax funds, and they're preparing or in the construction bid process right now.
But not actually constructing. In other words,
There are no municipal projects that are surtax funded that are currently under construction with surtax dollars. And I want to be clear about that, because there are some projects where surtax funds are coming in to augment an existing project. But we have not released the first advance for funding. We have executed contracts in the pipeline, but we have not received any invoices yet from municipalities requesting their first funding advance. Now, just for clarity on the record, for anyone in the members of the public, we're talking specifically here about municipal projects. There are county projects that are in construction that have been completed, so I want to just make it clear that this is a very small proportion of the overall program that we're talking about here this morning.
Yes.
no, I understand that. I just was wondering if there was any way in terms of incentivizing the cities to move along, anything that we could highlight online on the website that, look what's happening here, this is positive, this city is moving, I don't know. I just was wondering if there was anything we could highlight.
Well, very briefly, Mr. Chair, if I could that's one of the reasons why we created the dashboard, and it's one of the reasons why we're having a big special event with all of the municipal marketing and public information officers next week to try to get them excited. We've created branding kits for every municipality and their own special Matt Broward brands and logos, so that they do start to feel some excitement and some energy around communicating about these projects.
If I look at the 6-month financial report, unaudited financial statements, it reflects that the county has incurred expenditures of about $140, $150 million has been expended by the county for county projects, and that includes mass transit, expansions, paratransit, et cetera. So, we are funding projects, and the county is taking advantage of the funding, but the cities have not.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
except for the community shuttle program, which we have been funding since 2020, and it's expanding. I hope in this particular fiscal year there's some interest in expanding the services, so that the Surtax is funding 18 municipal community shuttle programs, both the capital and the operations and maintenance in full, and it's a significant amount of money.
Yeah. Okay, let's move
Mr.
to we.
Mr. Cooper, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'll be very quick.
No, that's okay.
Does each municipal project that's numbered have a separate funding agreement? And they're all negotiated individually?
Yes, so we have to have it's a project-specific agreement. So the
Yeah.
scope for each project and the funding for each project is tracked separately.
Okay. Are those available so that as each municipality comes in to negotiate their own agreement, they can review what the criteria and documents have been to successfully get to a funding agreement?
So when we received there was a process by which the county attorney's office communicated with all of the municipal attorneys in the preparation of the Surtax project funding interlocal agreement. So they all participated, provided comments. It is a form agreement that was approved by the county commission in August of 2020. So it is a public document. It is available and has been made available to everyone. And it's a matter of populating, certain sections with municipal contact information for notices, who their project manager is, and providing the exhibits, the construction documents, a schedule for design or construction, for providing the actual scope, the design scope for the firm that will be doing the design, or the complete construction package. So those are the documents. The exhibits to the agreements are what are needed in order to prepare the agreement. And if the construction documents are not complete and they haven't been submitted to us, we can't prepare the agreement. If the design scope for the design firm is not complete and we don't have it, we can't prepare the funding agreement, because the design document, the actual design scope for that project that the design firm is going to design for the project is the exhibit to the agreement.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any more discussion on this item? Okay, so we do have we were in the middle of an item, and it was about those, what were the 6 or 8 projects that were still unapproved, right?
So, Mr. Chair, at this point, it's actually an eligibility determination just for that West Park project,
Oh, the one that was,
002.
Pembroke
yes.
Park.
That was, I'm sorry, Pembroke Park, thank you. 002 that was ranked 18th in the first cycle, that was deferred. So you all never saw the project in 2020.
Okay. So the question would be, is it shovel-ready?
So the hope is that, the expectation is that it will be shovel-ready in 2026. So the
Okay.
proposal is to,
Okay.
is to recommend Pembroke Park Project 002 for construction funding in the new 5th year of the rolling 5-year plan, which will be
Okay.
FY 2026. So for eligibility purposes, Surtax funding can be used for planning, development, construction, operation and maintenance of roads, bridges, and transit. And so the Oversight Board's role under the ordinance is to review proposed projects and their proposed expenditures for eligibility under 212055 Florida statutes. This particular project, Pembroke Park PPRK 002, is for the construction of roadway and drainage improvements on Southwest 25th Street in the city of Pembroke Park. And while there are the design hasn't been completed and we don't have the construction documents, the project type is eligible, and I would recommend that the project as eligible, subject to review of the complete construction documents and the construction cost estimate for eligibility related to enhancements under Section 3 of the interlocal agreement.
Okay. So we need a motion to approve.
I move approval.
Okay, do we have any discussions on that approval? Hearing none. Should we take a roll call, or can we just yea or nay? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Okay, we now have a presentation of a map Broward video. Ms. Williams-Wilson?
Alrighty.
You go by Ms. Williams.
Williams Wilson.
Oh, okay, so, thank you.
She's newly married.
Yes. Thank you. Good morning, board members. I'm Tashana Williams-Wilson, Public Information Specialist for Matt Broward. Nice speaking with you all again. I'm here to give some background to this presentation. Over the past month or so, your Public Information Officer, Nicole Khalil, and I have been hard at work on our ongoing rebranding initiative, as you all know, for Matt Broward. You all have received the branding materials and such that we've given you over the last few board meetings. We are happy to say that we've conducted a mini solicitation done using the county's Office of Public Communications qualified vendor list to create a corporate video, and have been working on our first full-length video with the Emmy Award-winning ADG Strategy Group, who is in the audience today. Melissa, you could give a wave. So, this CBE firm that we're working with has worked tirelessly to create a draft brand video for Matt Broward, which I will present to you today, and hopefully more to come. as we intend to use this video, break it down into 1 minute and 30-second sizzle reels, teaser videos for our marketing strategy in the future. We welcome your feedback on this video, hence why we felt the need to present it to you all today, to gather your input from the Oversight Board members, stakeholders, and prior to finalizing this video so that we can use it in digital marketing strategies, event presentations like for next week and such, and moving forward in our strategy. So, without further ado, here is, give me a second, look at this, our Matt Broward corporate video. Excuse me, public communications team seem to be having an issue with volume. If Mike Jorgensen or Manning could come out and help for a second. Or just give me a wave when the volume's all good. Sorry for the delay, members. Thank you.
Probably needed from yesterday.
2 million people at the beach, on their way to work, headed to see Grandma.
Until I get back there before you play. I'll give you
Okay. Sorry. Brief pause. Okay, I've been given the green light.
2 million people at the beach, on their way to work, headed to see Grandma, constantly on the move. Each of us may be headed to different places, but we all face the same challenges going from point A to B: congestion, safety, and quality of life. In 2018, Broward County residents voted to do something about it, approving the Penny for Transportation 30-year plan. Using discretionary sales surtax, we would take mobility challenges head-on. Today, the plan is not just a plan. It's a program of smart projects that will innovate the entire county. MAP Broward projects will create connectivity, improve transit service, traffic management systems, enhance multimodal options, while ensuring economic development benefits. MAP Broward will improve technology and deliver transportation solutions which will relieve congestion and create safer commutes.
To make our morning drop-offs safer.
To make the commute to work easier.
To keep us pedaling towards a greener future.
Penny for Transportation is now Broward County's Mobility Advancement Program, or MAP Broward. Covering 16 project areas, MAP Broward's projects include electric hybrid buses and last-mile transportation solutions, resilience plans that upgrade roadway and bridge improvements, traffic management systems that utilize fiber optics to react to traffic flow in real time, and other mobility enhancements that make walking, biking, and enjoying your community easier and safer. Build on foundational elements such as transparency, accountability, and resiliency. We're committing $16 billion over 30 years to improve the place we work, play, go to school, call home, and welcome visitors from all around the world. Because we know the destination is important, but so is the journey. We invite you to see what's on the horizon for your neighborhood. See it all right now on our interactive project dashboard. Get started now. Visit mapbroward.broward.org.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you to ADG Strategy Group. I'll now open the floor for any and all feedback from our Oversight Board.
I think it was really, really strong. The only thing I would like to see that I see that is maybe missing a little bit is showing multimodal in the sense of like bikes alongside cars. I feel like the pictures of bikes were on a trail that's nowhere near anything, and my opinion is we need a lot more interactivity, right? Because we're very dense in Broward, and especially look at a city like Fort Lauderdale, we're gonna have to coexist. So I would like to maybe see a little bit of that imagery perhaps, but really, really solid. I thought it was good. I love the reference to the dashboard and getting people on there and looking at the projects near them, so it was very good.
Thank you.
Comments?
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Kelly.
Just had a suggestion, although, I mean, I think it's just great. But I know, like, I didn't get much of a sense of, like, what it's like for, from an interior perspective for a commuter, whether they get on a bus, whether they, it's the multimodal to some extent, but also, for instance, on the buses, they're touting Wi-Fi, you know, that whole experience, and the electric buses. And I don't know if I might have missed it, but I didn't see any paratransit vehicles, so might be nice to include one.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, I thought it was really well done. Thank you for preparing it.
Thank you.
For me, I don't know, I guess I wanted to see more about celebrating the economic impact that this investment is bringing to the community.
Okay.
I love the vibrancy of the video and the sites and everything that was presented, and the quality of what was presented as well. Excellent.
Thank you.
I did too.
Thank you. It's
Brown?
okay.
Yeah, I thought it was great, and it really puts a stamp on the idea that the investment is being made in the community and it's going in for everybody. So I thought you guys did a great job.
Thank you.
Very exciting.
Anything else? Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much. We have another presentation. We're going to get an update on the federal legislation, the Surface Transportation Reauthorization. Mr. Burns.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
So my name's Greg Burns. I'm with Thorn Run Partners in Washington, D.C. Happy to join you all this morning. I work on behalf of Broward County on a host of issues, but certainly supporting you all on transportation issues is one of those priorities. So, today I'm here to chat about what's going on with respect to transportation and infrastructure and those conversations in Washington. So with respect to the Surface Transportation Authorization situation, I think you all are familiar with what's known as the FAST Act. And the FAST Act is the existing Surface Transportation Authorization bill that underpins all federal surface transportation investment across the country. That bill expires at the end of September of this calendar year. And so the House and Senate are both feverishly working to develop new iterations of the bill for the next 5+ years. And in fact, both the House and the Senate just in the past month have released bills that would do just that. The House bill is very similar to what was introduced in the last Congress. It's still known as the Invest in America Act. The Senate bill is not the same as what was introduced actually in 2019, but it's still very bipartisan, and the title is a little different, but that's sort of neither here nor there. The point is they're both working towards a common goal of passing a new authorization bill sometime this fiscal year in FY21 in order to have that be ready for the expiration of the FAST Act. So the two bills are both 5-year bills. They do both propose to have significant boosts in transportation funding. The House bill, I think, proposes 54% increase over the baseline FAST Act. bill. The Senate bill, on the other hand, is about a 30-some%, 33 if I recall correctly, percent increase. It's only at the moment for highways, and this gets a little complicated as to why, but the Senate has 3 different committees of jurisdiction that ultimately have to act in order to create a surface transportation bill, and thus far they've only done the highway portion. So the highway portion would increase funding by about 33% over the FAST Act levels. So both propose significantly more money than we're currently spending today. Both bills do include climate change sections, so they are focused on that issue more than any other transportation authorization bill has been in the past, which is notable. And I think another notable item is that the House bill does include so-called member-designated projects, and I would just call these earmarks. Right now in the House bill, there are a number of projects that have been requested by Broward County municipalities, as well as the MPO, and several of those priorities are funded in the House bill. Ms. Cassini has a list of those that we provided to her if she wants to share those with you in the future, or maybe she already has. The Senate bill does not include earmarks at the moment, and so there's a question, to be honest, as to whether or not these earmarks will really make it through the process. One of the reasons is that the House has them, the Senate doesn't. We're not really sure what the Senate will ultimately do, if they'll agree to accept the House projects. But at the moment, they're in the House bill. The Senate bill right now is bipartisan. It was reported out of committee, at least again, that highway portion was reported out of committee in a completely bipartisan manner. It received unanimous support. The House bill is much less bipartisan. The Invest in America Act, when it was reported out of committee on Thursday morning, only received 2 Republican votes. If we move ahead to the next slide, you'll note that this is a graphical depiction of the overall funding levels, both with the FAST Act, the Invest in America Act, and the Senate Highway Bill so far. And note that each mode, highway funding, transit funding, and rail funding, all receive pretty significant boosts in funding under the Invest in America Act compared with the FAST Act. The largest boost, quite frankly, is for rail funding. As you'll note, that's the gray shaded part. But transit and highway also receive pretty significant boosts. And again, you'll note that the Senate bill also does include a pretty significant boost thus far for highway spending. I should note that the Senate Commerce Committee next week will be considering the rail portion of the Senate Surface Transportation Authorization Bill. It is a boost in funding compared to the FAST Act, but it is still less than the Invest in America Act. So when the Senate Banking Committee gets around to the transit portion of that bill, you should expect that it will sort of fall within those lines, meaning it will be more than the FAST Act proposed, but likely less than the Invest in America Act. So if we move to the next slide, and we look a little bit more closely at what the Invest in America Act will do, which is, again, out of the House, it really does try to mirror the President's American Jobs Plan. I mentioned that it's much like the bill was when it was introduced last year, and when it did actually pass the House, but it's gotten a little bit more robust in terms of overall funding, and some of its priorities have shifted a little bit. For instance, investments in electric vehicle charging infrastructure is something that has been added to the bill that was not as robust in the prior iteration. But broadly speaking, this bill is focusing on reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector, which of course is a huge priority of the American Jobs Plan that the administration has released. It does do a lot to fund EV charging infrastructure. I think along the lines of what you all will also be interested in, it significantly boosts funding for transit and for electric buses. It also focuses much more on how transit and housing development align and how they can sort of work together to create really vibrant, healthy, strong neighborhoods and communities. The new surface transportation bill introduced by the House would also fund much more resilient infrastructure investment. I think in the past we've definitely had not as much of a focus on trying to ensure that these investments that we make will be functional in the future. And this bill wants to make sure that any investment that we make is functional with a changing climate. And then last but not least, I think it's important to note that this bill does focus on, from a highway perspective, it focuses on repairing and maintaining infrastructure before building new roads. So that's not necessarily the case for the transit investment, but or rail investment, for instance, because they are talking about significant investments in new transit and rail infrastructure. But from the perspective of roads, it really focuses on taking care of what we have and not necessarily building new roads. Moving to the next slide, how does all this fit into the broader infrastructure discussion? I'm sure you're hearing a lot about all the conversations that are going on amongst the White House and the Senate in particular, but also to a lesser extent the House at the moment, where they're all trying to work together to come up with some big, broad, and bold infrastructure package. While the bipartisan efforts are, I think, useful and good to get to help move the ball down the field, ultimately, I think it is unlikely that the White House and that Republicans will be able to agree on any big infrastructure package. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But I think that there's a lot that separates them. And a couple quick hits as to what those separations are. One is the focus on the climate. The administration and certainly progressive Democrats believe very strongly that we cannot continue the status quo with respect to our investment in transportation, and that we have to incentivize a transition to a much greener transportation sector. And then two, it's really about how you pay for these bills. The White House and progressive Democrats do not believe that we should be essentially increasing user fees or the gas tax. Those are regressive taxes, and instead they very much support a minimum corporate tax. They support increased taxes on wealthy Americans, and some of the recent news items that have come out have sort of fed into that, where we found that some of the richest Americans aren't paying as much in taxes as some people believe they should, and where many corporations we know also arguably might not be paying as much in taxes as many people think that they should. So I think those pay-fors and the focus on the climate are really the things that will keep the Democrats and Republicans from being able to negotiate a bipartisan agreement, but we'll see where those conversations go. So where does that leave us? I think it is possible that the House and Senate could get together and pass a surface transportation bill that would look something like a middle ground between the Invest in America Act that's come from the House as well as what the Senate is still working to put together. That's a reasonable scenario, I think. There's some chance that it could get it would have to get some bipartisan support, obviously, in the Senate, and we'll see where that goes. That then could be followed up by a bigger infrastructure package that would be considered by the Congress via the reconciliation budget process that you became familiar with, because that's how Congress passed the American Rescue Act in March. So, expect these conversations to continue for months at this point. None of this is going to be wrapped up quickly. None of it's going to be dealt with quickly. That's just not the way that Washington works. But, infrastructure is certainly dominating the debate in D.C., and it will continue to do so, I think, for the foreseeable future. And we may see something finally done, hopefully by the end of September, but maybe even as late as, November, December timeframe. So that's the end of my PowerPoint discussion, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have, or if anybody wants to make any comments, I can certainly respond. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Mr. Chairman? Greg, did the Invest Act, does it have a pay-for issue?
Well, that's actually a great question. So both the House and the Senate authorization committees, they proposed the spending, and frankly, the different committees in the Ways and Means Committee and then another committee in the Senate have to come up with the financing. So to be blunt, they both do have some struggles in that regard too, because they do propose, vastly more spending. And to be honest, those conversations have not even begun.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for that report. We really appreciate it, Mr. Burns.
Thank you.
Just,
Oh, yeah. Is this for a different thing?
yeah, well, it's interrelated. It doesn't apply to the federal, but the
Okay.
state budget, the governor, or this year's state budget, there were projects that were out there that were approved as line items within the governor's budget. Did those affect Broward Transit or any of the highway projects?
I am not aware of there being any earmarks in the state budget that were related to this program. I will double check and make sure to get that to you if there were.
Do any members have anything they want to report?
Yes.
Go ahead.
The city of Fort Lauderdale has hired the Pace Foundation to work on this plus or minus 20-mile trail system. And I just want to make sure that the county's greenways people are talking to the PATH group so there's nothing lost in the transition. I ran into someone at the opening down by the port that I didn't realize the county was working on a bicycle pass system or whatever, correct?
No. So
Huh?
there is an existing greenways master plan.
Yes.
But for purposes of surtax eligibility.
I'm not even talking about surtax eligibility necessarily.
okay.
I'm just talking about the fact that I'd like to make sure that the county's greenway system and the city's trail system, almost 20 miles, are talking to each other because they need to interconnect physically. And it's just, I didn't know it had to necessarily deal with Surtax.
Oh, okay.
I think it has to deal with our mobility question we've been talking about. And here's a chance to make the county and the city's trail system work together. And I didn't know if the county and the city were talking about that.
We can inquire.
Yes,
Okay.
we have a person on staff who is actually Surtax funded,
Yeah.
who is a senior mobility planner, and whose focus is primarily on multi-use paths and
Okay.
greenways, who is actually from the city of Fort Lauderdale and is working closely with other municipalities on their multi-use paths and
What
greenways.
is her name?
Her name is Josette
If
Severin.
you'll send me that information, we'll make sure it gets to the PATH Foundation and they can talk.
I'm sure that she's listening,
They.
and I will make sure that she
Okay,
connects with you.
Thank you. For the good of the county and the cities.
Very quick comment. I think the tie-in, though, is multimodal is part of the solution to congestion. I know I've gone on record and said this before. We haven't done much with it here in South Florida. It doesn't mean we can't. There's so many national examples. It's not about bikers. It's not about exercising. It's about creating solutions with density, and it should be part of our purview here. I'll just make that kind of macro statement. Over time, just because we haven't done it doesn't mean we can't do it. So.
And we're going to have a workshop in August, so maybe we can discuss that more. I
Right.
mean,
And-
all those kinds of things and the connections with other programs that aren't necessarily surtax.
Right, and so, but in follow-up to Mr. Smith's comments, for purposes of surtax eligibility, it needs to be multi-use paths that are ancillary to road projects.
That's perfect,
So
right?
what you're saying is correct.
Yeah, the
Awesome.
Oversight Board did approve a Greenways master plan, both for 2019 and 2020, with very specific components, but we were having to go back and review the eligibility determination that was made at that time.
Okay. Does General Counsel have anything?
And I think I've said enough for today. Thank you.
So is Doug, but he's going to have to say something before we're done, right? No, I'm kidding. I always mess with Doug, he's my buddy.
Well,
Yes, Ms. Pennant.
I just won't be able to attend the next meeting, so it's gonna be my first absence. Because I am taking my daughter up to her new school, Howard University. So
Okay.
she's been there, but now she has to be physically located, so I'm gonna hate missing the workshop, so. just
Well, we're
wanted
gonna
to
miss
let
you.
know.
We're going to miss you. Okay, Gretchen, do you have anything?
I did, Mr. Chair. Just a few brief things. first thing, I'd really like to take an opportunity to say goodbye to an integral member of the Mobility Advancement Program and the gentleman who created your internal dashboard back in 2019 to track all of the projects from the original plan, and also the beautiful public-facing dashboard and many of our data visualization tools. He has been taken by Broward County Transit, and so he'll still be part of the family, he'll still be working on the overall program, but he will no longer be supporting you, and I just wanted to take an opportunity to say goodbye to Mr. Carreras, if you would just stand up and...
Nice job.
He's been very generous. He's going to help do some knowledge transfer with his successor and help us with the selection process. So I'm very grateful for that, and I'm very grateful for everything that you've done for the program so far, so thank you. The only other thing I wanted to just mention was we have had some initial meetings with the FTA and with Miami-Dade County. Obviously, you know that Broward County is in an MOU with the Florida Department of Transportation's District 4. We're working closely also with District 6 on the commuter rail project, and so that is really moving at quite a clip. I'm on the project executive committee, so I'll be bringing you back regular updates on that particular project. We were also invited, Tim Garling, the Deputy Director of Broward County Transit, and I had the opportunity at Jerry O'Reilly, the District Secretary's request, to meet with FDOT's central office. They have discretionary funding, much like the federal government. They have a New Starts program of their own. And they were generous enough to give us about 2 hours of their time to talk about this program and some of the discretionary grant opportunities that we might be able to avail ourselves of. Met with the Chief of Innovation, which was really interesting. And I also wanted to just mention to you all, because you're all very interested in leveraging the Surtax, that we have 2 RAISE grants, which are discretionary grants. They're the new build for those of you that might be familiar with the previous USDOT program that was called Build. RAISE is that next generation, and both Broward County Transit and our Public Works Department are pursuing RAISE grants due in July that would be able to potentially leverage Surtax funds.
Awesome.
So that's it.
That's great. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say?
I just wanted to share, and Thea reminded me, I may also not be present at the budget workshop. I too am helping my daughter with transitioning to Durham, North Carolina.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, meeting is adjourned, and thank you, everybody. Have a nice weekend.